Hi there, my name's Charlie Turnbull. This is a cheese masterclass, and the subject of today's cheese masterclass is cheddar, cloth wrap cheddar to be precise. Cloth wrap cheddar is not the same as many other cheddars. It is the oldest kind of cheddar. It has its own characteristics and its own sort of way of muscling its way onto the cheese board. It is also one of the more expensive styles due to its handmade characteristics and quite labor intensive maturing system. Right, let's have a look. So this is a cheese that is cloth wrapped on the outside, and when whole is about so big and about so round and 25 kilos. Now, different cheesemakers will have exactly different. They're normally between 23 and 25 kilos, and they will lose moisture during maturation, so they will shrink. They'll get smaller. They'll get lighter. So what is a cheddar? What is a cheddar? Well, the first cheddar is recorded as being about 1170 something, 1170, I think, when it was recorded in Henry the Second's court for his use. He was buying quite a lot of it, but there was cheddar making or cheese making before that. And one thing one must always remember is that just because the name was there 1,000 years ago doesn't mean it was the same cheese. In fact, very likely it wasn't quite. Now, in British terms, it became dominant in the mid-1800s and has stayed at the top of British cheese making ever since, to the point that 50% of all cheese made in the UK is our friend cheddar. But there was this big issue called industrialization, and creameries came along and they started adopting different techniques for making it, still focusing on what we will discover is a savory, salty, umami, really rich character, which is very important. But the industrialized versions have diverted in the way the starters they use, the way they mature in plastic rather than in cloth, and the way they cheddar their cheese, which means you get a much more even flavor. So let's not forget what the other cheeses are. How is this one made? So the milk is taken in the normal way from the cows. There are lots of unpasteurized versions of this as well as pasteurized versions. The cheese is taken into the vat. It is the normal thing of starters and rennets, but then we start to break this cheese, the curd, up into small pieces, and we're looking for pea-size little bits of curd in the whey. We then heat that through to make a mesophilic around the 42-degree scald. Now, the thing about that particular scald point is that it will prefer some bacteria that are within the starter cultures or within the milk over others. So that is very important, but it also has an impact on the way that the cheese maturation will perform later down the road. That mesophilic thing, very important. So we then take those curds out, we lay them out on a large tray, so like a large vat, like a big table, and we allow them to dry a bit there, and the curd, the whey runs away in these channels between the curds. That is the British style of cheese making, as contrast to the European style, where the curd is allowed to consolidate and recombine underneath the whey. We're looking to recombine our curd out of the whey in the open air on the table. Now, the type of recombining we use for making cheddar has its own name, named after the cheese, called cheddaring. We pull the curds back, we make a big pile of each one, and we start to layer them out. They start off looking like breeze blocks of cheese or building blocks of cheese, and then after they have flattened and got closer and flattened and got closer, they almost look like flatbreads or naan breads. And we stack them up. We then remill all those curds, making things that look a bit like fat chips, fat French fries. And we salt them there. So the salting is of the curd. And then we stick a big spade underneath and start filling the vats surrounded by cloth. All very complicated, but each one of those steps is essential to cheddar making. That's what makes this cheese what it is. Now, you can watch videos of that on YouTube. There's a good video of cheddar making on the Academy of Cheese. Now, the thing about this is that we get to the point of loose curd in the mold, and that's one of the key things in cheddar making. Is the pressing isn't there just to draw out a little bit of moisture. Most of the moisture has already been drawn. It's to close the gaps between those curds and really push it close. But that's another characteristic of this cheese. You can see on this one, but inspect your cheese, is that the curd still has a slightly loose character to it. You can see differences between the curd. When we look at other things like Goudas and Gruyères, it's completely homogeneous, no gaps through the curds. With cheddar, we're expecting little dry fissures, closed gaps. This one has opened up again slightly, but that's what probably happened after this point. So we're closing the gaps, and we'll be able to see the gaps between the curds. Important thing about cheddar. So then we get it into the store, and it's got roughly a minimum 7 to 8 to 9 months to get into the zone. And good cheddar is that 11 to 14 month period. Some people like to push cloth wrap cheddars later than that, but unlike bag wrap cheddars, which is another way, this cheddar does have a peak maturation, and it's tricky to mature cheeses beyond the 24-month mark in cloth wrap cheddars. Some people do it very quick, very good at it, but most people are selling it around the 12 month because that's the flavor profile they want. Age isn't everything. Age isn't everything. Right, so let's have a taste of this. What are we expecting? Well, being a classic cheddar, one of the things that's absolutely essential for it is that we're having a high savory, high salt content. But let's look at the character of it first. Right, it breaks. Can you see? It breaks. It's got a dryness to it. Okay, right. It's not crumbly. It just breaks up into bits. Okay, that is very characteristic. With other cheddars made in different ways, they can be very soft, very malleable, maybe putty-like. But we want that dryness to open up there. Now, you can massage a cheese before you taste it to give a better sense of what it's going to be, to speed up the flavor release. But that's up to you. I just like to chew it a lot. So start with our taste. So I'm getting a really strong lactic note. So the acid is there. A really strong savory note. So I've taken my bite from the center of the cheese. We know bitterness there. We can get bitterness towards the edge. Bitterness can pick up off the rind. Can be delicious. The cheese slightly dries out, becomes a bit more savory, really funky, cool, but towards the edge. In the center, we're not expecting any bitterness. So we've got savory, we've got salt. Oh, it's quite salty, this one. And we've got acid. That's what's going on in there. No sweetness. So in the flavors, now some people say there is a flavor called cheddar. I think that's very British centric, but it's very buttery, it's very lactic, bit of cream, and with this one you can get some milk or raw milk flavors, but I haven't on this cheese. It's very much in the butter zone. Now, what happens when we start looking for other flavors? Now, in cheddar styles, you think of them as being agricultural notes. So we're talking fields, we're talking farmyards, we're talking hedgerows, those kind of things. Not sweet meadows. No, that's more the kind of alpine pastures thing we're going to discover with Gruyere. But no, this is much more sort of West Country muddy fields kind of thing. What you're also going to get is some things like maybe meatiness. Brothiness is a classic word that's used to describe some cheddars here. So there's a real sort of meaty element to it. You know, I like that. It can be really nice. And some people look for a certain spiciness that you can get. Mustardy, white peppery, horseradishy. You take your choices. You put your own name on what you flavor. There is definitely a zing to it, a good cheddar. There is also something some people call bite, right? Aged cheddars have sort of a bite. Now that can be high acid. You can begin to get a stringency out of these cheeses. The thing about the high acid and the stringency is you move out of the tastes and flavors and into trigeminal experience, and they can be very dominant, and you begin to lose the other flavors. So the presence of bite can be a double-edged sword. What you get in va-va-voom, you lose in subtlety. And I myself prefer to stay back from that and make sure I'm getting the full flavors of the cheese, which I very much like. So that covers your flavors. I really like this. Now we're just going to taste. We're going to go in here and we're going to taste something near the rind. Generally, yeah, it's got it here. It's really nice. Generally, this acidity falls back. These are drier, slightly more brothy. I'm going to say something weird. I taste of library books. I don't know how much library books you've consumed in life, but it's kind of got a mustiness, a celeriness, that sort of dry, aged vibe. I really like it. I like having it with and in contrast to other parts of the cheese. They are both extraordinary things. So enjoy that. Go looking for it. So I have 22 to 5 kilogram drum, 35 centimeter in diameter, 30 centimeters tall, cloth wrapped. Cloth will be removed. You tend to see the impression of the cloth. I don't know if you can see that. Oh, there is it. Can you see that? It's got an impression of the cloth on there. Very nice. This one of Montgomery's, he leaves his rinds still decorated with the natural molds that have grown up there during the period of maturation. They tend to be white with maybe a bit of orange / brown and little grey spots. Very nice. I think that's great character. But other great cheesemakers like the Keens and the Westcombs, they strip their cheese and they pull that back and make sure it's less dominant. Can you get vegetarian options? Yes, you can. The rennet is not defined, and these cheeses are not covered by a PDO. They are not covered by a PDO. You can make a great cheese outside the PDO. There is a West Country fine cheese, a West Country farmhouse cheddar cheese PDO, but it's so broadly written that cloth wrap cheeses are just a small segment of it. So look for the really good makers. Pitchfork, amazing. Keen's, amazing. Quick's, amazing. Montgomery's, amazing. Westcombe, amazing. 5 great cheesemakers there if you go to find some. So enjoy going looking for great cheese. I really hope that you find and love the great cheddars of the world.